So at 16, I left with a backpack and I traveled halfway around the world to Southeast Asia. And I landed there and I did missions for 20 years. I didn't get married to my first husband till I was 31. Involved in humanitarian work, meeting people where they were at, helping the vulnerable, from basic needs, a lot of other things. Owning my own business, working, living, traveling for close to 20 years in Southeast Asia. Yes, it was a lot of work, a lot of heartache sometimes, a lot of giving out of yourself, but in return, it was worth everything. And we were truly thriving in that life. We had become part of that culture, part of that land. Abruptly, we had to leave Southeast Asia and relocate to either Europe or to America. We landed in America with literally 6 duffel bags and a 100-pound dog named Jedi. We had made a life together over there, so when we had to abruptly leave, it was heartbreaking for us. We left what we loved, so they had all that history, landing with nothing, rebuilding everything, trying to make a life for ourselves. So we finally kind of got ourselves situated. We'd had an amazing summer of hiking, camping. I'm so glad to have had that last year together, and it was just a really precious, special year together. So we'd lost Jedi at 14 years old. I mean, that was just part of life. So unfortunately it was sad, but at the same time, he'd had a good, long, glorious life. And so there's just the two of us. It was like every other morning, and I said goodbye to Theron. He went off to his work, I went off to my work. Mid-morning that morning, I was actually with a customer. I got a phone call saying that my husband, Theron, had been involved in a car accident and I need to get to the hospital ASAP. I just dropped everything. You know, was it just a fender bender? Was it, obviously he was in hospital, but was it, what was going on? And it's kind of like your whole life just stops before your eyes. No, it's terrifying. I arrived at the hospital, and long story short, by the time I had arrived, Theron was already dead. I remember sitting in that waiting room. It was the height of the pandemic, and so the lady that came with me, I was on my own. I'm an immigrant, I have no immediate family. They separated us, told her to wait in the car outside, all the mask on and all that stuff. And they kept me waiting for like 45 minutes for the doctor. And I should have known something was up because I was with, well, it was just odd. They had me sit in a room with, it was called an interfaith clergyman, an all-faith religious leader of some kind. It was just odd. And there was some small chat, but I was like, I need to know what's going on. And the doctor comes in, and so you're like, okay, well, it's serious, but you know, we're gonna be okay. And there was no way around it. He was already gone. And it's like it's like this wave of emotion came over, and your ears are hearing it, but your mind's not believing it. Like you're literally in denial, because it's like, there's no way. This is not, no. And anyway, I was completely and utterly on my own. I had no one. I was absolutely on my own. And they said, you know, his body's in the ER room. They kind of had to do a lot of different things, but without getting too much detail, you know. And they said, you know, you can take your time, say goodbye. And they had him covered up because obviously he'd gone through they did a lot to try to save his life. And it wasn't pretty. You know, I walked in there and it wasn't my husband. It wasn't Theron, because he was gone. It's incredible to see that, because you realize the essence of who someone is what I call your spirit, that person. Once he was gone, when I saw the body, it was a shell, it was a body. Everything that made Theron who he was already gone. I guess that's how I look at life. I looked at the body and I kind of said goodbye, because sometimes, I mean, you're in shock, so of course there's things that you just do for the sake of it. But I remember looking and just, that's not him. He was gone. He's already gone. It's the shell. It's just a body. And I had a prayer. I had a moment with God, me and God, the Holy Spirit, and I said goodbye. Nothing that I could do, nothing that anyone else could do, anything. No one could bring him back. I had some tears, but I kind of held it together, and it was shock. It was who I am, how I deal with things. I really just needed to be alone. And I think This is where I'm very different from people, and I think this is where I get my strength from, and this is what can be an encouragement. It didn't matter who I was with, it didn't matter if family was there, I don't think it really would have mattered what was going on. I needed to be alone. And of course everyone was worried about me, everyone was concerned. You know, you can't be alone in an apartment, you lost your dog in May, now you've lost your husband in October. Was trying to console me, I guess. I was like, in all honesty, I want to be alone. And it wasn't that I was trying to retreat, I needed to be alone in order to figure this out. I closed the door, and then finally when I closed the door, I broke. I broke, and I dropped to my knees, and I still was trying to figure out, how could this happen? How did this happen? It was just so quick, so random. One minute we're talking about, hey, let's do leftovers for Thursday, and then maybe Friday we'll go out or whatever, and this is where we're gonna go. Say goodbye, honk honk down the road, mid-morning, like that. He's gone. I didn't even get to say goodbye, nothing. So that's the story of how everything happened. In that moment, I could have decided to literally and figuratively lay down and die. I'm not talking about taking myself out. I'm talking about let what the world try to do and try to kill me for who I am. I felt like I was getting killed slowly, killing me slowly by taking us out of our environment where we thrived. Then this happened, and then that happened, and that happened, and then we finally were doing okay, and then all of a sudden this. And I think moments in people's lives, I've had other moments like this too. You can choose one thing or the other. You can either choose to lay down and die, or you can choose to stand your ground. I refused to move. I refused to move. And then slowly I was able to get to my knees. A little bit further, I was able to stand up still again. And I stood my ground. I dug my heels in, and I just stood still. My sister called me. She was just like, hey, Kez, look, you've been, in Asia for a long time. America's just not working out, or, you've had a rough time in America. But, I don't think she even said that. I think she was thinking that. But she just said, Kez, come home. And you know what those words meant to me? And I just, for a glimpse, for a moment, I thought, you know what? Screw it. Just screw it. Why don't I just turn around, leave this country, leave this mess, and just go back to England? Maybe end up in Ireland somewhere, because my father's from Ireland. It's a beautiful country. But go back to see my family. I hadn't seen them since before the pandemic, so at that time it was 3 years, I think. For a moment, she's like, that person saying, hey, I can help you. And she was like, Kez, come home. Come home. We've got a place here for you. Spend as long as you need to figure out things, but just come home. And it was an offer for me. And I just was like, maybe, and so we had the conversation. I put the phone down. I remember thinking, no, I cannot do that, because that means going backwards. That means defeat. That means going backwards. And this was for me. This is not for everybody, but I hope that you can hear where I was, what I did, what I saw to keep moving forward. And that represented going backwards. And I just really believed with all my heart and soul the direction that Theo, my first husband, and I were on, the place where I was at, the direction I was in, being in America, building the life that we did from scratch, that was where I was supposed to be. Now, could I have visited my family? Yes, but it was the pandemic. It was the height of the pandemic. So I couldn't even do that. I couldn't visit, but I think that actually was a blessing in disguise, because then I didn't go back to visit and then end up staying there, because I was very vulnerable. I'd been knocked to the ground, but I could have gone home, and that wasn't even my home. My home was with my first husband. My home now is with my Red, my husband, my family. My home is not a building. My home is not a dwelling place. My home is not a house with a bedroom and a sofa and a TV. My home is not brick and mortar. My home, at that time, was with my first husband, and obviously now he'd gone. My home now is with my husband, my family, my Red. That's our home. No matter, as long as we're good, as long as we're one, it doesn't matter where we are, I'm home. And I've always lived that way. I might not have been able to articulate it that way, but going home was just going to another place, going to a country that I had come from. It wasn't that. And so I needed to take that current home that I had, even though my husband was gone, and I had to keep moving forward. And you know what was so cool is if I had not done that, I would not be here. I would not be able to share the story. I would not be able to share my heart. I wouldn't be happy again. I wouldn't have a love of my life. I wouldn't have family again. I have Red, and I have our little family unit. I have what I had before, but that was just the beginning. This now, because I always move forward, always move up, always looking for something else. This now is even more than what I had, even deeper than what I had, even better than what I had. Because you should always be moving forward, should always be moving up, should always be encouraged, should always be looking for more, trying to grab as much as you can out of life. Even the career that I have, truck driving, the money that I can make, Red, my family, who I'm with, my whole life is so much more fuller, so much more amazing, so much more beautiful, so much more fulfilling, and I'm so much more happier. But if I had not stayed the course, I would not be here in this course. My sister says, come on home, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. I have to stay here. On top of all of that, that week, we were supposed to sign a new year rental lease for the apartment. I'd lost 70% of my income. So all of a sudden, I can't afford the apartment that we were renting. In that week, with a good friend of mine, I packed everything up into storage, put it into a storage unit, packed my truck. I had camping gear. I had a 1993 F-150, but the back pickup part had a cab over. I had a bed made up in there. I had camping gear, cook and eat, sleep. And that vehicle was ready for me to live out of if I needed to. I couldn't do this, so I couldn't keep on living the way I was living. I cut everything back. I turned everything in. I consolidated as much as I could so that I was financially okay. I wasn't living in a place that I couldn't afford. I was mobile, minimalistic, nomadic. I'd done this before, but I refused to give in to say, oh, now I need a handout. I could never use the word widow. I refused. And that's not being silly about it. That really, for me, I was like, yes, I had lost a husband, and it was a great loss, but I am not what you typically call a widow. And so I couldn't use that word. It was very hard for that word to come out of my mouth, because I was like, I am not going to let this moment define who I am. I'm not going to be 60 years old living some life and saying, well, you know, at 41, this happened to me, and this is what marked me for the rest of my life. This is why I am the way I am. This is what happened. And I refused to allow that, even that time to mark the rest of my life. So with all of that went on, my world was turned upside down. I'd lost everything. We lost our baby, our Jedi, our dog. I lost my husband. I'd lost the apartment that we were living in. I refused to use the word homeless, even though technically I was homeless in a sense. I refused to use the word widow, and I thought, stand the ground, keep moving forward, keep the course, regardless of what's happened, regardless of what I've lost along the way, keep the course. I ended up temporarily moving in with a friend of mine down in Texas, but I was sitting there thinking, I cannot stay here. But I allowed myself some of the initial grief, but I knew that I couldn't just stay there very long, because I might get stuck in my heart, not physically. It was barely 2 months. I needed to move forward and make a life for myself now, and be able to earn more than just what I was earning. And I wanted to thrive again. You know, I wasn't going to just let this mark me and say, well, you know, 20 years ago, I was widowed, and then I was homeless, and then, well, you know, life just kicked me and killed me, and this is who I am. I wasn't going to sit and live off other people. It's just not who I am. And then all of a sudden I was thinking about what could give us money, what could give us freedom, what could allow us to travel again, what could allow us to have the freedom to be out on the road, nomadic, minimalist, along for the ride and an adventure. And so, truck driving. So I enrolled myself in CDL school to become a truck driver, get my CDL A, no restrictions, gear stick. And I remember being in class, barely holding it together, because I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, am I crazy, or am I really doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing? Because part of me just thought I was absolutely crazy. And I know other people must have thought, what on earth was Kez doing? But I don't really care. But I just knew that that was the trajectory I was on, that was the path I was on, and that's the way I needed to move forward. And I'm so thankful that I stayed on that course, because I'm here now. And you know what? Becoming a truck driver was one of the best things I could have ever done. Did it scare the crap out of me at times? Yeah, and I'm sitting there with a big old trailer on the back, just driving down the road, learning how to do the stick shift before I'd even taken the test or anything. And I'm just thinking, what the heck am I doing? I can barely see over the steering wheel. The dashboard is kind of halfway in between. I'm kind of trying to move my hips because my legs couldn't touch the pedals. I mean, these of course were older vehicles. Some of the newer ones now, you can adjust everything, the power seat and all that, and move it around. The best thing I ever did, which led me to getting into a company where I was kind of stuck, which led me to Red, which led me to my family, which led to me to my husband now, my Red, which led me to this life that we live together, which led me to the last 2 years team driving over the road as truckers and stacking cash and living a nomad minimalist life, living out of the tractor, saving money, and just thriving on this life. Obviously I didn't know that I would be sitting here when I made that decision to stay the course, but I'm so thankful that I stayed the course, that I didn't deviate from where I was supposed to be, where I was called to be, where I was meant to be. I hope my story can encourage you. I gotta let you know that it's been very, very hard to share this. I've had a few multiple takes, but I tried to get this done today because I hate being vulnerable. I hope me laying that out before you and my outtake on life, my way of looking life, the way I run my life can just encourage that if you get hit in the head by life, if life tries to take you out, if life tries to kill you, it's not the end. And no matter where you are, what you're doing, what happens, where you've come from, what was going on before, stand still, dig your feet in, and keep moving forward. Left Montana completely and utterly broken, and yet I've come full circle back around. I'm now living in Montana. I have a safe refuge. I have a husband again, my Red. I have family. I have my Chewy Boo. We have our small pack unit. You think, oh, well, you know, you went through it all and you lost it all, but everything's okay now. And it is. It's been nothing but supernatural. But it doesn't just stop there. Even this morning, my Red woke up and his heart was going 100 miles an hour. Diagnosed with heart failure. I'm facing yet losing another husband again. The only constant that we have in this life is change. Not just surviving, but thriving in this life, regardless of that change. Living life wild, open.